I love the season of winter, and so does the rest of my family. Enduring the harsh cold is only a minor fee to pay in order to enjoy the festivities of the joyful season. Whether it's speeding down the snowy hill in our backyard, ripping through Christmas presents, or even building a snowman, we always manage to have fun. I noticed a particular accentuated amount of attention on building snowmen for my family. All of us love doing it, most likely due to the subconscious reward of bonding it created. I was always in charge of making the first and biggest snowball for the base, while my sister made the second two. Then my parents, of course with my newest and youngest sibling, would tack on such details as the carrot nose, the coal eyes, the little buttons, the warming scarf, stick arms, and, exclusive to my family, the hay we used for hair. My family was so into the collaborative effort of building the snowman that we had actually added our own details. I had never before heard of someone adding hair to a snowman, especially not with hay. Regardless, we all enjoyed the time of winter, and nothing was more soothing than a mug of hot chocolate at the end of a freezing day in the cold. Winter had just started and all the hype for it had lived up to expectations. Already it was snowing at the beginning of the season, but this wasn't anything odd for Minnesota. My friends and I kicked off the start of the season with a massive snowball fight. They all gathered at my house as we pelted each other with the compacts of ice. As I attempted to run for shelter, a ball hit me in the face and I fell down a nearby hill. I was getting back up when my peripherals caught something. My heart skipped a beat as I thought I saw a man walking in the woods. However, my fear was soon proven unjustified as I peered at the figure. It was somewhat hard to make out due to the distance, but it looked to be nothing more than a snowman. I was sure children were just excited about the winter season and couldn't wait to build one. I returned to my friends and we finished off the battle. By the end of the day, I sipped my hot chocolate to the bottom of the mug and headed off to sleep. I rolled out of bed that next morning, slightly groggy. I was tangled in my covers, almost trapped in them. As I ruffled out of my blankets, I hopped off my bed. Making my way to the bathroom, something once again alerted my peripherals. I turned to look out the window and saw an eerily familiar sight. It was a snowman. But this wasn't just any snowman. This snowman was similar to the one I had seen just a day earlier. However, now it stood directly in the center of my backyard. Though I earlier couldn't entirely make out the snowman, I was almost sure for some reason that this was the exact same one. I wasn't so much saying the same people built it, or that it was similarly structured. I legitimately believed what stood before my eyes was the exact same figure. Same snow, same nose, same buttons, same scarf, same everything. Even the hay hair looked the same. It was then I realized something. The hay hair. That was something signature to my family. It was then I realized one of us must have built it. And I felt excluded that they had left me out. I stumbled over to my sister's room with what little early morning coordination I had, and I asked her about the snowman. Of course, she said she had no idea what I was talking about. I chuckled and told her how her pranks were only getting worse and worse. She promised me she hadn't built anything, but I continued to vest more trust in my original belief that it was a minor prank from her. But just to assure myself, once making it downstairs, I questioned my parents. And similar to my sister, they promised they hadn't built a thing. Though I had put the blame on my sister previously, now I felt somewhat unsure. After finishing off my breakfast, I called my family to go outside and take a look at the snowman. Once only inches away from the figure, I felt discomforted to see the detail in the creation. It looked no different in any manner to the snowmen my family had built in the past. Down to every single specific thing we did. It matched on this snowman. Rather than sharing my feelings of unsettledness, my mother looked at me in anger, stating that we were only to build a snowman as a family. I told her I had no part in building it, yet she refused to believe me. I sat in my room for the next couple of hours, bounded in my thought process by this odd snowman. I stared at it almost all day, noticing its unordinary size. It stood nearly 7 feet in height. My family never even flirted with that level of stature when we built them. After hours of thinking, I finally remembered an outstanding fact. When I originally saw the snowman, it was resting in what looked like someone's yard through the woods connecting our houses. I looked beyond the trees as well as I could from my room and noticed a familiar house. Strangely enough, the snowman that was once there no longer existed. I went out the back door of my house and trekked through the woods, trailing my way up to that house. I didn't see any cars in the driveway or any lights turned on inside. It appeared that no one was home. I decided to ring the doorbell, but of course, received no answer. My next option was to press my face up against the glass and take a look inside. When gazing into the home, I noticed an open bag of chips on the table and a pantry that looked nearly fully stocked. I would argue that someone had been living there based on those surroundings. To gain more information, I went over to the neighbor's home and decided to ask a bit about what they knew. An old man greeted me at the door. He carried a cane with him and he struggled to stand. The elderly man gave off a kind vibe and invited me in. I asked about his neighbor, and he went into quite a lot of depth. The man explained that he had lived in this particular house for over 40 years and had fairly a lot of insight about the neighborhood. However, he said that his neighbor was the closest thing to being an exception. He best described them as mysterious. That doesn't surprise me, I said. The man reiterated. Yeah, they were an odd bunch, son. I'll say that much. I gave him a puzzled look. Were? Well, yes, boy. They moved out a couple years back, he replied. I didn't shake my confused expression. Well, if they moved out, who lives there now? The old man looked at me as if I was ignorant and spoke. Well, no one now. It's abandoned. I didn't give him much of a reply. I thanked him for his info and nearly headed out. I stopped at the door and fired away with another question, however, before I left. Do you know why, by any chance, they left? I believe it had something to do with them feeling uncomfortable. I'm not really too sure, he replied. I left his house and returned home. I sat up, sipping on my hot chocolate. I didn't really sleep much that evening. I just thought of it more and more. I couldn't seem to shake the thought from my head. Finally, I lost my fight against sleep and passed out. Of course, When I woke up and took a look outside the window, I gazed down at that same snowman. I tried my best to ignore it and continued on with my day. I went through my usual routines, every now and then allowing the snowman to draw attention. However, I, for the most part, drained it from my attention span. I slept fine that night after a full cup of warming hot chocolate. I indeed was well rested, having a pleasing period of slumber that previous evening. But that morning only greeted me with surprise. I instinctively scanned my backyard for the snowman, but he was nowhere to be found. I couldn't see a trace of him. No carrots, no scarf, no buttons, and no hay. I thought this was a bit peculiar, but I forced myself to ignore it. The day went on rather slow as I continuously let the snowman eat up my mind. I looked every hour at first to see if he returned, then every half hour, then every 15 minutes, and before I knew it, I checked every minute. I was pretty sure I spent my whole day in front of the glass, looking everywhere for the figure. But as much as I looked, it was nowhere to be seen. I freaked out when I went to make hot chocolate. There was no mixing powder left. That couldn't be possible. There was at least 3 mugs left this morning. I was overridden with panic, and I couldn't seem to expel it from my emotions. I thought to myself that it was quite ironic. First, I didn't want the snowman here, and now I was almost hoping it would return. I said to myself, "Why are you panicking? It was just a pile of snow. Just a pile of snow." I laughed a little bit, realizing I was freaking out over nothing. I mean, my sister could have easily eaten up all the hot chocolate with my parents' help. I headed to my room, only to have my laughter cut short. On my bed was a carrot, 2 pieces of coal, some buttons, some twigs, and some hay. Beside it was a note that read, "Hiding in that pile of snow was too cold for me. I like the warmth of your home better." We moved out the next week. We went somewhere much warmer. It's been about a year since then. Florida doesn't have winters. But nobody in my family knows who built the 7-foot sandcastle that popped up in our yard a couple days ago.